Welcome to the continuation of our Next.js coding blog. In this video, we'll focus on the navigation with an emphasis on the side navigation. We're going to customize the material UI draw component such that we can have nested sidebar navigation and routing. So if we take a look at the screen here at the demonstration, we can see that we have this nesting in here, and we're currently in the learn section for Node. And I can go ahead, I can click on the TypeScript section and that'll take me to the TypeScript tab. Now I'm currently on the introduction, and if I click on basics and I click on types, and this just takes a little bit to load. When we deploy the application, it should be all good. But in development mode, I think because we're using this syntax highlighting here, and also the MDX component, it needs to do a lot of work. But essentially what I want to highlight here is that we're in the TypeScript section, and we're in a section called types, which is nested within this basic section, and then it goes and it highlights basics and it also highlights types here. So let's go ahead and get started. Here we have our project so far, and I just want to make some adjustments to the articles, to the learn articles. So let's just go ahead and click on learn and open up a couple of our MDX files here. Here we see the contents of what we're going to display. So we have this metadata up here, topic, section, and part, and this shall suffice. The introduction, it doesn't have any subsections nested within it or anything like that. But if we open up the TypeScript folder here, we'll see that we also have an introduction here. So same thing, we've got a topic, section, and part. So each of the sections will have an introduction, but they'll also have some other articles. And there's two different scenarios that can happen here. Either you can have a article or a section that has subsections, or the section can be the topic in itself. So just to demonstrate, I'm going to create something here. I'm going to call it the extra.mdx, and I'm just going to go ahead and copy some stuff over here. I'll just copy that here. And we'll just say, you know, this is some extra stuff, and, you know, it doesn't really matter what we have here. We'll just have this here. So this is just, it's similar to the introduction MDX file, but I want to have a separate file or another file that is nested within a subsection. So I'm just going to have a file here, and what I'll call it is, I'll call it types, because we're in TypeScript section. And once again, I'll copy this contents over. But what we'll do in this section here is we'll go ahead and we'll just add a subsection. And of course you can, you know, create your own learn sections, or you can just copy this from the GitHub repository linked in the description below. But let's say this subsection is the basics, and it will just be the basic types of TypeScript. And we'll just say, here are some basic types. So we can just go ahead and copy this here, I suppose. And now we have this extra section here. So we want to be able to handle that. And one thing I'll do is I'll just close these files up, and I'll just start the server just so we can see where things are at. So we can see here that we don't have the side navigation bar, and we also don't have the learn navigation bar, and we're just getting the article displayed here on the screen. So right now we're in the Learn section for TypeScript and we're looking at the introduction. One thing I just want to start off by doing is just adding the highlight. I want it to be the secondary color rather than this blue color. So I'll start with that. So if I just open up the styles in the global styling here, I can go ahead and I can just create a few things here. So the first thing I want to do is just get the selection tag, or it's a pseudo selector for the selection event. And what we'll do is we'll just give it the color, and I've already pre-selected this. This is a color from the theming section. So you can open up that and choose your color. So F73378. And I also just want to make the code a little bit bigger in the code snippet. So I'm just going to target the code block, and I'm just going to say I want the font size to be 20 pixels, and I want it to have a font weight of 700. So nice and bold, so we're able to see it nicely. And I might go ahead and just make the font size of everything a little bit bigger because I think it's a little small at the 16 pixels. So let's make that 18 pixels. And now you can see that the selection is now that pink color, and the font's a little bit bigger, and this is also bold. So it's a little easier to see. So what we'll work on next is we'll just create the simple learn bar, just so we can navigate between our main topic, so between TypeScript and Node, for example, and then we'll work on the side navigation part. So inside components, let's create a new component, and we'll call this the Learn Navigation component. And then we can just use the RFACE code snippet, so we can generate our React component, our arrow functional component, and then we'll just rename it to Learn Navigation component. So this is going to take a few things. What we'll need here actually is just the topic. So I believe we'll need to have a type here in models, and we'll just call this the topic.ts. This is where we'll have all of our topics. So I'm just going to export the type topic, and right now we have TypeScript and Node, and of course when we add more topics we'll add them here. There's not going to be a huge number, probably 5 to 10 or so. So we can just come here and add that. And then we can get the correct type safety that we want. So what we have here as a prop is we're going to, and actually we're going to use functional components. So we can just go ahead and get the props here. And then we'll just need to import the functional component type from React. And this allows us to create our own prop. So we have an interface here with the props, and we just want the topic. And we can use the lowercase method, and then we can pass in topic. So this is built into TypeScript, where we just take the lowercase version of topic, because we want to match the string from the URL to the topic, although the topic itself, it doesn't necessarily, you can have a capital letter here and here. So we just need to get that type all right. So with that, we can destructure the topic and then just get that in there. So what we'll do is we're going to display different colors for different themes. So we can just go ahead and get the custom theme in anticipation to utilize that as we build it out. And we'll do the same thing for the side navigation when we get to it. So we'll go ahead and we'll import that, and we can just do a control period, and then we can import that from MUI material. And then I'll just do an Alt down and space out the React components with the material UI components, and of course my component or type. So now we have the use theme. Let's go ahead and we'll create a couple of CSS styles here. So we'll start off by having a menu item being active, because we want to change the color when it's active. So we just want to have a cursor here of pointer. Our background color, or we can just say background. And this is where we can use our custom theme. So let me just do a comma here. So we can access the custom theme, we can access the palette, and then we can get the primary, and then we can go ahead and choose the light variation for when it's active to distinguish it from the background. So then we'll give it a height of 48 pixels, and we'll also give it a line height of 48 pixels. Next, we'll have the menu item, and this is just going to have a top and bottom padding of 0 and a side by side padding of 8 pixels. So there's some separation between the menu item text on the left and right on the horizontal. And then we can just target the hover state by typing &:hover. And then we can just refer to the active menu item styling object that we just created here. And of course, we'll just need a comma after this property here. So what we'll do is we'll use the app bar, and I'm just going to copy some imports over. So the imports that we'll have here, I'll go through these. We can copy the code. We're going to have the link from next/link. We're going to have the app bar, toolbar, and typography, and we've already got the use theme and topic here. So with that, we can come to our code and we can use that, make use of that. So rather than returning this div here, I'm going to return an app bar, and the app bar is going to contain a toolbar, and the toolbar will contain the links. So let's start off by creating the properties that we need. Firstly, we want it to be fixed. So we'll just say that this is fixed. And then we can use the SX property to get the styling for this particular Material UI app bar. So the first thing we need to do here is we need to make sure that we don't have any problems with the indexing of things, because when we have our side navigation bar, we need it to be below the headers or the navigation bar parts at the top. So what we're going to do here is we're just going to get the Z index, and this can take the theme as a sort of a arrow function here. And then based on the theme, we can get the Z index property And we can do that of the drawer. That again, the drawer is the component that we'll be getting soon. And then we can just +1 to that. So then this will be on top of the drawer or the side navigation bar. And I think we need to do this for the header that we've created. So let's just go ahead and open up the header component. And for the header component, we see that we have this box surrounding everything. We flex grow. Then we got the app bar. And we can see here that we got this position here of static. Now that we're going to have two navigation bars on top of each other, we want this to be fixed. And once again, we'll go ahead and we'll get this SX here, and we can just copy this here. So we can put the navigation of the header component in front of the soon to be coming side drawer component. So then we got our background color, and then we also have our color here. So we've got our links here. So right now we have our icon, button, just my name there. Then let's see. So I believe that's all we need here in the header component. So let's just save that and close it up. Now, if we go to the page where this is going to be rendered, let's just go ahead and get the component in so we can start to see what we're working with. So if I just close everything up, I'll be able to easily navigate to the learn section. That's where the articles are, but in the pages, in the learn section, we can see that we've got this topic here, and then we've got this dynamic page being rendered. The topic and slug are both dynamically rendered. So let's just take a look at our code. Right now, we're just returning the MDX page itself. So let's just go ahead and expand on this. So for the learn page, we want a second navigation bar that we're just working on here. So let's just go ahead and use this component here. And we'll place this right at the top. So what we'll do is we'll just have a fragment here. So we can have the one element or one parent element. And then we can have the learn navigation component. And we can just go ahead and have a self-closing tag here. And this will take a topic, which will be a topic. And of course, we're going to need to adjust our imports here to be able to do that. So when we come down to getting the static props, we have our topic here and we have our slug. And then we're looping through all of those and we're returning the paths and the fallback. Then we want to go to get static props because actually we already have access to it. We have the source or the MDX source being returned here, but we just also want to return the topic, which we have access to, and also the slug. So now that we're returning the topic and the slug, we can come back up to the top here. And we can say, okay, in addition to the source property, we can access the topic and the slug properties. And we're inferring the type of those with the infer get static props type. So that's all good. So next, what we want to do is continue working on our learn navigation component. So here we have the topic here. So let's just go ahead and import that if we can. So I'll just go ahead and copy this import. Actually, I'll just type it out. So we're going to import the... Oh, it was actually already in my buffer, so that's all good. Import the navigation component, and then we just need to go back 3 directories and we can reference that. And now if we save that, we can see where we're at. So right now we can see that we've got this singular navigation bar. Now we want to display things nicely here. So let's just keep working on it. So just below the learn navigation component, I'm going to have another div here. And inside this div, this is actually this is where I'll have the side navigation component. So I will come back to this. But right now we just want to fix the, this. Let's continue to work on the navigation bar. So right now we have the app bar in the position fixed, and then we're just adding some styling here. So to fix the layout, we'll just have a top property, which is nested within the SX, in the SX styling. So we'll give it a top of 64 pixels. That's how big the first navigation, the main navigation, or the header is, the header component. So then I'll give it a background color. And this is where we can access or use the custom theme. So we have access to the custom theme, and we can look at the palette here, and we'll take the primary, we'll make it the dark, and then we can also just have a color, so the color of the text, which will be also the custom theme inside the palette. And here we'll use the primary contrast text that we have access to. So let's just save that, see where we're at. And now we see that we've got these 2 navigation bars on top of each other. So that's what we want. So let's continue to work on this. So let's make it a little bit smaller, this secondary navigation component. So on this toolbar here, I'm going to give it a style, and you need to use min height. It's just in the documentation for the toolbar component, and I'm going to set this to 48 pixels. So we've got 64 pixels for the first one, and then 48 pixels. That's a nice proportion of 64 pixels, roughly 2/3. So we got the height of the toolbar being a little bit smaller. Then inside here, we're going to use the next link component. So we're going to wrap the link component around a typography component. And the typography, inside the typography, we'll have some text here. And actually we'll need to have the href for the link. So let's just create that. So this will just be going to /learn, the absolute path. So from the home path to /learn/TypeScript. And we can point towards the introduction here. And then we just need to add in the pass href attribute. And then in the typography here, we're just going to, we can just hard code this. We'll just say TypeScript. We don't have to make this too fancy or anything, because, there's only going to be the 5 or 6, 7 selected topics, and we'll know of those ahead of time. If we're doing something where we needed to dynamically generate those, then we could do that programmatically, of course. But here in our typography, we'll just give it some styling here. So basically, if the topic that being passed in is of the type TypeScript, then what we'll do, and remember it's going to be lowercase because it's coming from the URL. So in that case, what we want to do is we just want to go ahead and take the styling from the menu item active, because it means we're on the TypeScript page. The URL has TypeScript as the topic. So we want to highlight that menu item. It's going to be the active menu item. And in addition to that, we'll just give it a margin left of 216 pixels. And we'll see why that number in a moment. Basically, when I have the sidebar, it's going to be 240 pixels on the left there. And then it's just a little bit of rounding with some margin and padding and stuff like that, just to line the text up next to the side navigation bar. So that's the first case. And then in the second instance, it means it's not the TypeScript. So we can just go ahead and we can say, we can just get rid of this object here. We still want the margin left, but we don't have the necessity to get rid of this to highlight it from there. So that's that there. I think I can get rid of one of these extra brackets here. So let's just go ahead and add a couple of more properties here. So the styling here, this is going to pertain to the menu item. So the menu item just here, each menu item is going to have a bit of padding to left and right and a hover state. And then we can just give it a particular variant. So we'll just give it the, the H6 variant. We'll just go ahead and save that. So now we can see that we've got TypeScript here. And we can see that the text of it is black. So let's go ahead and adjust that. So let's change the color of the TypeScript text from black to white. And what we'll do is we'll just head over into our styling, into our theme actually, in utils. And we'll just go ahead and we'll change this contrast text to FFFFFF, which is white. And now if we take a look, we see we got this white here. And we're on the TypeScript page, so it's highlighted for us. So let's add another option just to check that things aren't highlighted when we're not on the correct slug. So yeah, let's go back to here. We can Shift Alt down the typography here. Actually, we'll need the link as well. So let's do that. And now here, we want to have an extra option for the node section here. And essentially, if this is learn/node/introduction, it means the topic is node. Then we can more or less have the same thing here. Except in this instance, only the first one needed the margin left here. We can just go and remove that and also remove that, and they'll just evaluate to an empty object. And then we have the menu item and then node. So let's just make this uppercase to be consistent with the heading in the other one. Let's just go ahead and save that. And now we can see when we hover over it, we get that. And then if we click on node, it does take a little bit in development mode, but it does route to where we want it to go. So we're going to the TypeScript/introduction section. Don't worry about the syntax highlight not working, although we can see that our custom highlighting is working. If you refresh the page, it should work. And of course, when we render in production, we'll be having the HTML static assets. So this should be all good. It's just while we're generating this on the server in runtime, in development mode. So okay, so that pretty much is the navigation. Now I want to work on the side navigation. So let's begin to work on that. So to work on the side navigation draw component, we're going to need some data that we're putting into that. So we'll need to come up with a data structure that's going to represent our contents in the navigation, all the routes that we can click on. So what I'm going to do is inside utils, I'm going to have another folder, and this is going to be dedicated to the learn section. And I'm going to create a file here. I'm going to call this TypeScript.ts. And this is going to refer to the learn TypeScript menu. So what I'll do is I'll export the TypeScript menu, which is going to be of the type menu, and we'll need to create that. So let's create that now actually. We'll just put it up here for now, and then we'll eventually put it in its own file. So basically a menu is going to be an array of menu items. So let's create the menu item type. So menu item is going to be a record where the string is the key is going to be a string, and the value is going to be an array of strings. And then the type of the menu is going to be an array of menu items. And I'll explain the types when we get some real value. So here's our actual values. We have our menu, which is an array of objects. So a record is sort of like an object, and each object will have a key, which is a string, and a value, which is an array of strings. So we're going to have a key here, and we're going to call it basics. And then in the basics section, we're going to have types. And then we're also going to have something called syntax here. These are just, what I've decided the file names are going to be inside the basic section. And then I want to have a section here called extra, but there's going to be nothing in there. And the idea is you're inside TypeScript, and you might want to click on the type section within the subsection basics, but you might not want to display a subsection. You might just want extra to be a one-off. So we'll just have this data structure here where the key is that route, and then an empty array just signals that there's no nested articles or snippets inside that section. And then we can have some advanced stuff here, just so we can visually appreciate the work that we'll do. So we'll have generics here and classes here. I don't know if classes actually is advanced or not, but just for the sake of having some data here. So now that we can see our types, let's go ahead and put those into models here. So we'll have a file in models, and we'll just call it menu.ts. And this is where we'll export these types that we've explained. We'll just go ahead and save that. And now we can go ahead and we can import this from our models here. So we go back to directories in the models folder in the menu file. So that's the TypeScript side navigation that we're going to have there. So next I want to work on the node, just so we have two. So I'm going to have a new file here. I'm just going to call this node.ts. And I'm just going to copy this TypeScript here. So rather than TypeScript menu, you could probably guess that we'll call this node menu. It's going to be of the type menu. So here what we'll have is we'll have, so node has rest as a topic, and then we'll just have some subtopics, simple, advanced, and then we'll go ahead and we'll do the same thing with the same names, and we'll do that on purpose so we don't get any clashes in our data, or if we do, we can handle that. So I have my topic there for GraphQL, then simple and advanced, and now I can just go ahead and save that. And now I can go ahead and just close those files, but I might just keep them open just for now, because we're just going to create a little helper function, and we'll do this in here, and I'm just going to have an underscore before it just to signal that it's a helper function, and I'm just going to call this menu lookup.ts. So menu lookup, basically what we need to do is we're going to, for any given topic, we need to return the menu. So we're going to get the topic from clicking on one of these topics here. So we're going to have access to the name of the topic, but then we want to go ahead and retrieve this data structure which represents the menu for that particular topic. So what I'll do is I'll just export a constant variable here, and I'll call it menu lookup equals, so it's going to be a function here. It's going to be an arrow function. So we're going to be able to take the topic. So we have that. So if we just click F12, we can have a look in there. So we've got TypeScript and Node. And I can just alt back to this tab here that we're working on. And basically, it's going to either return the menu if the topic's valid, otherwise it's just going to return nothing for us. Otherwise, it'll just return null or nothing because it wasn't, the topic wasn't passed in and matched a topic that's in this menu lookup function. So the first thing I want to do here is I want to get the topic and convert it into lowercase, and that's just so we don't have any clashes between lowercase and typecase and all those other types that it could potentially be. Now, of course, we're going to need to import menu from our models, and then basically what we'll do here, we'll just say if the topic to lowercase, if that is equal to TypeScript, what we'll do is we'll just go ahead and we'll return the TypeScript menu here. And I just realized this is the wrong imports. Menu is from models, not from TypeScript. And then this TypeScript menu here, import TypeScript menu from TypeScript. Okay, so they're just mixed up somehow. So if that's that, we'll get TypeScript, and I think I just need an E there. TypeScript menu. And then I'll just copy that, because then we can say if it is node, actually we could probably have else if, then we'll just go ahead and we'll return the node menu. And of course you would need to build this up as you add more topics. And otherwise you just return null, because the topic that you tried to look up isn't there. Now, of course, this shouldn't happen because we're going to be using the function ourselves, but it's just to get the type safety there. So that's essentially our menu lookup utility method. So now we've got our data structures and our utility methods. We can begin to work on the actual sidebar. So I'm just going to close all of these up. Close theme up. We can even close header up now. So we'll mainly just be working on the, and we can even close the learn navigation as well. So we'll just be working on getting our side navigation bar here. So let's go ahead and create a component for that. And what we'll call it side navigation .component.tsx. Once again, I'm going to use the code snippet for the React arrow functional component with the default export. And I'm just going to come to this dot here and make it a uppercase C. So I just save that there. So what I'll do now is I'll just copy a bunch of imports over. And again, you can copy these from the GitHub repo, but just to go through them, we'll have the link from next link, we'll have useState, useEffect, and the functional component type from React. And then we're just going to have some of the material UI components. So we're going to have the box, draw, toolbar, list item, text. And then we're also going to have the keyboard up and down icons. So we can open and expand and detract our sub menus. And then we're going to have CSS baseline that just helps with the properties being propagated. And then we have this use theme. That will be our custom theme. And then the menu and menu item that we just created for the types for. So with that, we can start by making our component a functional component. And then we can just pass in some props here. So we can go ahead and define our interface for props. So what we're going to do is we're going to have the menu. We're going to need that menu that we just created, that data structure we just created. We're also going to need the slug. So the slug is the very end part of the URL. I don't know if that's completely accurate definition of slug, but that's what I'm going with here. Just the last part. So here it's introduction. So not including the topic. If that's strictly true or not, you know, don't know how accurate that is, but let's just go with that for now. And then I'm going to need the metadata. So the metadata, now that we have changed the metadata a little bit, it's not going to be the same as the blogs or the articles metadata. So if we just open up the learn section here and just open up the types, we can see that sometimes they have this subsection, sometimes they don't. And we're mainly interested in this part here. Remains to be seen if this part is needed. I may end up removing that later on. I'm just keeping it there now as a reminder in case there's, you know, multiple parts. But they'll be seen as I start to build out the content. But basically, we can see that the metadata is going to be a little bit different. We're going to have sections and subsections, and they're the two main distinguishing types there. So if we come to models here, let's just go ahead and create an interface. So we'll distinguish this between the blog interface by calling it the learn metadata rather than metadata. And now that I have two metadatas, you know, could probably call the other one blog metadata or have a base metadata that you extend or something like that. But for now, I'm just going to have learn metadata. And this is going to be an interface, TypeScript interface. So I'll just go ahead and export an interface here. And I'll just call it as the name of the file, learn metadata, which is going to have the section, which is a string. It's going to have the subsection, which is a string, and it's going to have a topic, which is a string. And I'm not including the part here because I'm not going to be using it, but if I do, I'll need to come back and change it. And I'm just going to make this subsection optional. So section relates to something like TypeScript, subsection relates to something like advanced, and then topic would be something like generics, just as an example. So now I have that. I'm just going to close that file up, and I can close this file up too. And now I can give the metadata prop the metadata type that we just created, or interface that we just created. So now we can do the structuring for our props, and I can just get the menu, slug, and metadata. And once again, in anticipation for using the custom theme, I'm just going to have a variable here called custom theme, and that's just going to use the theme. So let's just go ahead and save just to make sure there's no errors. And okay, there's no errors, but we haven't really made much progress visually. So what we'll do is we'll have a function here, and we'll just say, we'll call it const get initial menu. This is going to be, it's going to take the menu, and we don't really need to pass the menu, but I'm going to use the use effect hook and reference it. So then when we change between the Node and TypeScript tabs, it's able to detect that and not show the same old menu, even though when we statically render it, there shouldn't be an issue, but just for development purposes, it just visually looks nice if the UI updates. So what we'll return here is the initial menu will just, it's going to be the initial menu. So we can just go ahead and map through that. And then for each menu item, which is of the type menu item, we can go ahead and we can just return the object, the menu item itself. And then we'll also chuck on this property here. We'll append this is open property to false. So by default, everything will be closed, and that makes sense. And did I spell that wrong? I think I've got an extra initial menu. Yeah, so by default, we'll have the get initial menu. It'll be the menu with the is property flag to false, which will be used to display the submenu and also the highlighting or of which tab is open. So then we can come here and we can have a little bit of state in this file here. So I'm just going to go ahead and use the use state snippet here. So what we'll have is we'll have the active menu. We'll call it active menu. And I'll just make this an A. So use state, initially, it's going to have the initial menu. And then I can just pass in menu. And then basically, if anything happens, like you change the page, like really just in development mode, but you use the effect hook, what we'll do is we can get rid of the cleanup. We can say if the menu were to change, what we'll have here is we'll set the active menu. And we'll set it to getting the initial menu. So the idea being is if we open up the files here, if you're on the TypeScript file, you'll have this menu here. And then let's say you click on the tab here, you click on the node section, then it will get this next menu here. And so the menu has changed. So this property will have a bit changed. So we can reset the state such that everything's closed and it will just be the particular section that we're on, which will be highlighted. And then if you expand it, it will have further, if it's possible to do so, then we'll have the further nested highlighting there too. And again, this menu has been passed in here just so I can use this get initial menu in both places here, and then when the menu changes we can detect that. So that's why menu is passed in as a variable. Again, this isn't completely necessary. It's more for us in development mode, but nevertheless we've already built that out now. So what we'll have now is we'll have another helper function. And this is going to pertain to the styling, because when we show our, when we have our side navigation draw component, there's always going to be an introduction. So I'm going to hard code introduction, but then I'm going to need to dynamically render the other elements, including the submenu menu of those list items. And then we'll need to apply styling to both. So we're going to go ahead and have a function here that is going to get the menu item style. And basically what we'll have here is we'll have two values. So we'll call one value 1, and then we'll have the second as value 2, and they'll both be strings. And then what this will do is it's going to return an object for us. So this is just for styling purposes. And we'll see the v1, v2 as we use it. But essentially, we want the color to depend on these values. So if the value 1, and I'll do 2 lowercase, is equal to value 2 to lowercase, then we'll have a ternary operator where if that evaluates to true, we can go ahead and we can use the custom theme. We can go into the palette, we can take the primary color, and then we can take the main primary color. Otherwise, and I'll just copy this part here, we'll just take the text and we'll take the primary text. And additionally, we'll just have the cursor being to pointer. So you could probably guess by this part here that we're just mainly going to be testing the strings of two values. And I'll just put a comma here. We'll be testing the strings of two values. So basically, if the URL, or if a part of the URL, like a slug or topic or something like that, is going to be equal to the particular item, then we'll go ahead and we'll return that highlighting for that color. And I've done this sort of generically because we're just going to apply this in a couple of situations, as we'll see. But the general idea is just to have, you know, a reusable function such that we can display the highlighted, the active particular page that you're on. So I'm going to have a function here, and I'm going to call this get introduction li, or short for list item, or something like that. So it's not going to take anything, and it's just going to generate HTML for us. So what we'll do is we'll just go ahead and return some JSX. So we can use the link component here, which will have a href. And I'm just going to build this up. So I'm using the curly brackets and the backticks. And this is just going to go to /learn/metadata. So let's just check. Yeah, we got the metadata. So that's the part at the top of the files here. So here we got section, and here we got subsection. So essentially, if the metadata, if the particular section, so something like TypeScript, and then we'll just make this to lowercase here. Oh, I imported the wrong metadata, I believe. This should be learn metadata. So that's an issue with the name of the interface. Stuff like that can happen, but we're using TypeScript, so we can catch stuff like that too. So the metadata, the section, which is that TypeScript, we can see that there's this sort of title case here. If that is equal, and we put that to lowercase, essentially where we want to route to is whatever that section is. So in the case that we click on TypeScript, we can take the metadata, which has the section TypeScript. So we'll go to /learn/TypeScript. And then by default, what we'll do is we'll go to /introduction. So whenever you click on these routes here, it will just go to the introduction, which is the very first part and sort of a special case. And then of course we can just have our pass href attribute here. Now inside here, inside the link, we're going to have a list item. And a list item, we're going to have a class name here of list item. And we're also just going to give it a key of -1. And I give it a key of -1 because when we go loop through our data structure, I believe it starts at 0. So then we'll go 0, 1, 2, 3. And I just don't want to have any duplicates of the keys. So this first hard-coded one for the introduction, I'll just set that to -1. So we have this list item class. So we need to apply that style or create that style. So what I'll start by doing is in our return here, I'll have a fragment just so I have one parent selector. And then below this div here, I can have a style tag here. And inside the style tag, I can have the object, which I'll have some backticks here. And then what we can have is we can just say, we can set the list item, we can set the hover state, and we can set the background color. And I've just selected this based on my stylings, but the RGBA will be 9, 211, 173, and 0.08. And this is when you hover over the list item, you could imagine that it changes the background color, so it's slightly emphasized. Of course, we need to get the build the actual draw component, but we're building it out. So we have our list item with the class name list item, a key of -1. Now nested in the list item, we're going to use the list item text component. And this can just be one of those self-closing tags. So I'll just do that. And then I'll set the text to introduction. And I'll give it a style equal to the get menu item style here, where I pass in the introduction text here. So if I look at this function, I think by default, I'm going to set this equal to the slug. So this last part here, so in this case, it's going to be introduction. And so I don't need to pass a second argument in here because by default, it's going to look at the URL slug. And then I want to compare it to introduction. Now this is hard coded for this special introduction case. So if that introduction matches this introduction, so I'm on this particular exact page, then I will get the menu item styling. And that basically means that these two values are equal to one another. So I'll have the teal highlighted text. Otherwise, you just return the standard primary text color, which is just the white. So that's that. So now that we have our get introduction li, let's start to build out our draw component and make use of that. So just here, this div, this is just going to be a box. So we can wrap our box, our draw with the box. So I'll just give this some basic styling. I'll just give it the display equal to flex, just so everything's nicely displayed. And then we just tack on this CSS baseline, and that just ensures everything works basically with the draw component. And then we'll go and create our draw. And the starting points for this is on the Material UI documentation for the draw component itself. But I've sort of adjusted it a little bit. So we'll have the draw here, the draw component. And the particular variant we'll have here is we'll have permanent, because it's possible to toggle the draw component, hide it and stuff like that. But in our case, we want it fixed to the left-hand side of our page. And we'll just set that to permanent. And then we'll just give it some styling here. And we'll give it the width. And we'll set this equal to the, let's see here, draw width. We're going to reuse this width. So if we just come to the top of our page here, just above our props here, we'll just have a variable here. We'll just call it draw width. And we'll just set that equal to 40. Okay, it's complaining about the type, which is really strange. Okay, there we go. So the draw width will be the draw width. And of course, we're going to come back to do the responsiveness of this at a later video. It should be halfway there because we're using Material UI and, we've sort of kept in mind a little bit. But we'll come back and we'll do a proper responsive design video. So we've got our draw width on our draw. So we'll add some more styling. We'll just add the flex shrink property and we'll have that to 0. And then we'll just have this, this just comes from the documentation. So I'll just copy this in. And so did the flex shrink MUI draw paper. Because the draw, it has a particular class on it that's been there by MUI on the component itself, where we can set the width and the box sizing to border box. So that just comes from the documentation, just to make everything look nice. Now, inside the draw component, we're going to have a toolbar component. So we'll just say toolbar. And then what we'll do is we'll have a box. And I believe that toolbar there is just, it's in the documentation. So I just did that. And then the toolbar, so it remains to be seen if this toolbar is needed or not. I'm just copied it from the documentation. Could be that we don't need it. But they have it in their draw component. This needs to, we don't need this. So I'll just leave it there for now. And then below the toolbar, we have a box. And I'll just say box. Now the box, it has some styling on it. Has an overflow of auto. Margin top of 48 pixels. And then in the box, we can go ahead and we can start by having the, so we're in the draw component. So we're creating the draw here of the side component. And then in that, we want to get this introduction LI. So let's just get that. And then we'll just wrap it like this here. Let's just save that, see where we're at. We've done a little bit. So let's just refresh. Now, right now, we don't have any list items. So we actually need to reference it for it to show up. So let's just come to the actual page itself. And we'll just say where we have the MDX here, we'll have a separate component or a separate section. And we'll just have a div here. And we'll have some styling on this div. And we'll set this equal to display flex. And then we'll have our side navigation component. So our side navigation component, I believe that auto imported it for us. Yep. And we'll be at one of these self-closing tags where the menu, so we've worked on the props, I believe, where you got the menu slug and metadata. And we have this is where we can use our menu lookup function. So just below here, we can have our menu and we can call the menu lookup function. And we can just pass in the topic and we can just say as menu. We know it's going to be of the menu type. So let's just go ahead and get that in from our models. Okay, cool. So now we have our menu lookup. We're able to get the menu based on the topic, and we have access to the topic. So now we have access to the menu. And then we also have the slug. So we can just say, let the slug equal the slug. And we can also get the metadata. This is just from the source. So we can just say the source.scope. And recall that earlier we set that up. So we have this source here, and the source has this scope here with the metadata, and just need to be in that format so we could serialize the MDX. So now that we've passed in that, let's just go ahead and save it. And we can see that we've got this here. We've got this introduction and it's selected. So what I want to work on now is just work on the nested part of it, the more interesting part of it. And that will pretty much be all of the content in this video. So let's just go ahead and continue to work on the side navigation component. And actually, one more adjustment I'll make here. Actually, we'll come back on a separate video. This is getting quite long to doing the responsiveness of things. So we can come to our code, and we're returning this draw component, and we're getting the introduction li. Of course, you could refactor a few things. We'll probably come to refactoring in a separate video as well. But here we want to have a list. So we want another list. And let's just close that up. So inside of our list, we want to we loop through our active menu. So recall that we've set the active menu when we get it initially. And then if we make any changes, or basically if we click on anything and open it up, we want to have that state stored. So that's why we reference the activated menu rather than the menu itself. Let's see, active menu. And then for the active menu, what we'll do is we'll just map through it. And for each menu item, and this is not a menu item because it also has the isOpen property on it. So we'll just set this to any for now. We'll probably come back and refactor that. We also want the index so we can put the unique key on the list item. So we get that. And what we'll do is we'll say we'll let, and we'll use some array destructuring here. So basically what we'll do is we can call object.entries on the menu item. And if we just open up our menu, just so we can see what we're dealing with here, we're going to have an array of these objects. And there's also going to be a secondary property. So there's going to be isOpen, equal to true or something like that. But we add that in. And then it could be that there's a key, well, there's always a key to denote the topic, but there also could be the actual, the topics themselves. So what we can do, this object entries is going to return, an array of arrays essentially, where each array refers to a particular menu item, and the menu item contains, in the first element, it's going to contain the key here. So basics, and then the second key is going to take type syntax. So we can just use some array destructuring here So we can go ahead and we'll call that key the label. And then we'll refer to the second properties of it. And we'll refer to the second element, or the first. So we'll refer to that as the label. And then we'll also have the sub menu here. So we're just using array destructuring. And then we're also going to have array destructuring for the next element. So we can just say, get the isOpen key. We won't actually use this, but we just need to do this destructuring here so we can get the value of isOpen. And with that, we should have the label, the sub menu, and the state of whether or not it's open. So we want to have a link here, but the href is going to depend on the length of the items. So if it's just going to say extra, for example, there's nothing in there, so we want it to go to the key. Alternatively, we want to go to say /types. So then since there are array elements, we want to go to that particular element rather than the key. So what we'll have here is we'll just need to build up that href. So let's just say we'll have a constant variable here. We'll just call it href. And essentially we take this sub menu, and right now we just need to cast it to a string array. And if the length of that is greater than 0, essentially what we want is we want to go to the absolute path, /localhost/3000/learn, or whatever our URL is, /learn/ and then we want to go to metadata here. We want to go to the metadata section to lowercase. And we want to go to a particular, the particular slug that we have access to. Otherwise, and then we can just go ahead and copy this down. Otherwise, I just want to go to metadata.section to lowercase / the label, because the label will be what we want. So just to go through that again, we have our particular data structure, which represents our TypeScript menu. If there's nothing in the, if there's no if there's no elements in the array, or there's no subtopics, we just want to go to the extra. Otherwise, in the case of types, we don't want to go to basics at all. We just want basics to be a placeholder for the section. We want to go to type, so we want to actually go there. So this first value is known as the label, or I've denoted it as the label. So if the submenu has a length of 0, we will use that. Otherwise, we'll actually just go to the slug that we've got from the page. So now that we have the href, we can make use of that href. So what I'll do is I'll have another section here. So this is happening, this is all happening within the map. So I'll have a constant variable. I'll just call this section 2. And I'm calling it section 2 for 2 reasons. The first is that it's the second section after the introduction, but also I don't want any duplication. I've got the section in the metadata, learn metadata type, and just to sort of distinguish between the two. So we'll see the same thing for subsection. So of course you could call the variable whatever you wish to call it. But I'm just going to return some JSX here. So I'm just going to return the link. And I'm just going to close the link tag, because I'm going to wrap it around a list item. So I'm just going to copy this here actually, just as a starting point. So the href is just going to be the href that we've built up. And we're going to have the pass href attribute. And then we're just going to set the key equal to the index. And then on the list item, we're going to have this class name here. Oh, I don't know what happened there. On the list item, we're going to have the class name of list item. Now we're not going to have the key here. We got the key on the link, on the parent of the first element that we're returning. So we're going to have an onClick method here. And this is just going to be equal. We don't really concern ourselves with the input here. But what we'll do on click is we'll just have a variable for the active menu. We'll just call it AM. And we'll just go ahead and we'll destructure, or we'll use the spread operator to get all the contents of active menu, but have it separate to the actual active menu state. And essentially we have a if condition here. So if you click on it and, you know, if the active menu, if the index of the active menu, and we'll just need to cast this as any, that's why I got the brackets. If we take the label and the length is greater than 0, what we'll do, what's wrong here? This needs to be here. So if that's true, we just need to change that particular index, and we'll set it equal to AM, where we take everything from AM for the index. But then for that particular index, we take the isOpen attribute and we set it to not isOpen. And then we can go ahead and we can use our set active menu to change the state to the active menu. So just to go over that, we have our active menu, which is similar to this menu here, but with the isOpen Boolean property as well, nested in each of these objects. We click on a particular item. If the item, so if we're in the case where this has a length greater than 0, so basics and advanced in this case, then we want to set the state of that to isOpen. But if it isn't, we just want to ignore it because there's nothing to open. So it can't be true. So if we do open, we just change the state of our application. And then in list item, just below this on click, we can have a secondary action. And this is where we can say, we can loop through our object values. And I'm just got these brackets here to cast it. So we take the menu item and that should be menu item. So we're only, when we get the object values, we're just getting, you know, things like that. And if there's another one here That'll be the second one. So we're only really interested in the first element in the array, like of the values. So this array here will be the first. So what we'll do is we're only concerning ourselves with that, and we'll just cast it to a string array. And basically, if that length is greater than 0, we can go ahead and we can return some JSX. So we'll just have a fragment here. And what we'll say is we'll just say the menu item, if that is open, we'll return the keyboard arrow up icon. And we'll give this a styling where the cursor is equal to the pointer cursor. And we'll also give it a color of primary. Otherwise, it's not open. So what we'll do is we'll return the same sort of thing, but for the keyboard arrow down icon. And we'll just save that. Just refresh. Oh, and we need to return that JSX as well. So I may as well just work on this last section, get the subsection of everything, and then we'll be able to see everything. So we got the list item text where we get the introduction, get the menu styles there. Actually, no, I copied that from the introduction section, so I need to modify this. Basically, we do want to get that style, get menu item style, but rather than pass in the introduction here, we just want to pass in the metadata. And if there is a subsection, we want to pass in that. So that's just saying if this exists, we'll pass that in. Otherwise, we'll go ahead and we'll just pass the topic in. So we can just say otherwise metadata.topic. And then we can just go ahead and pass the label in as the second argument. And this menu item, so I'll just check those values, and if they're equal, then we'll set some highlighting here. So this isn't going to be introduction. This is going to be dynamically rendered. So this is going to be the slug. And then that's all we really need there. And then we'll have one more. We'll need to take care of the subsections if we have them. So just below this link here, we'll have a const subsection. I'm just calling it subsection 2 because of the fact that I don't want to confuse it with the subsection that's on the metadata, the learn metadata that is. So we'll just take the submenu as a string array. And then we'll just go ahead and we'll just map through that. Now, if there's nothing there, then there won't be returning anything because there'll be nothing to map through. But we can just go ahead and we can take the item, it's a string, an index of the type number. And then we'll just go ahead and we'll return some JSX here. And essentially, let's see here, the menu. I think it's just complaining because I'm not returning anything. So if I just return the menu item, if that is open, so I only want to display the subsection if the particular section is open. So if that's open, we'll go ahead and return the JSX. So once again, we'll just copy this more basic version of the link and the list item, and then we'll modify it. So we got this link here. Now we're going to need to give it a key. So we'll give it a key. So we got this section here. So firstly, we got the introduction section. We'll give it a key of -1. So it'll be unique and independent from this next section here, where the key is just the index. So, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. I want to uniquely identify the subsection as well. So I'm just going to build something that's unique up. So if I just take the label, so say basics, and then have an underscore, and then have this particular index, that should be unique. So I'll just plus on an underscore here, and then plus the index. And if I look at the href, it's just going to be learn/metadata.section, and then slash whatever the particular item is that we're on. So the item dot to lowercase. And then we just pass the href once again. Then we have the list item, class name list item. We no longer need this key here, but we will need the list item text. And the style, we can once again get the menu item style. And we can just pass in the item here now. And we'll just, for now, we'll just have this syntax here where we have this arrow here to denote the sub item. We might come back and tweak some of these minor styling points when we come back to the responsive design video. But essentially, that's the main logic that we want there to return our submenu. So what have we got here? We've got our getting the introduction. We have our, our labels, or our this level in, and section 2 we've called that. And we've built up the JSX for section 2. We've rendered the introduction, so we just need to render section 2 and the subsection. So at the very end of all of this, just before the closing tag, we can go ahead and we can return through the section 2 and the subsection 2. And we should be pretty close now. So now we can see that we have our menu. We can hover over different elements here. So we're in the learn/TypeScript/introduction. Introduction is there. Now I must have hard coded something to introduction. So I need to go back through and change that. So this list item text here in section 2, rather than returning the slug, which is just always going to be introduction when we're on the introduction page, this actually needs to be the label. So let's do that. And now we can look at our menu here. We got introductions highlighted, and we can click down on basics, click it up, click down on advanced, click it up. And if we go ahead, and I've created an article for types, so I'll just go ahead and click on types. We can see that now this is highlighted. We're on the types page, and this is selected here. And if I click on node, we can see that it takes you to the introduction section. Now I don't have any articles for that, but if I go back to the TypeScript section, and once again I click on something like the types article, we can see that the state's all working good. It's returning the correct side navigation bar, and it's also doing the highlighting for us. And if I just refresh the page, we should be able to get the syntax highlighting here. Now I do note that there's a couple of things missing on this page. We're going to revisit this page and tweak some of the minor details with the formatting and responsive design. But just to recap what we've done today, essentially we modified the particular code snippets such that the metadata has a section and subsection relating to it. We created this secondary navigation bar where you can click on the particular section that we want to, or the topic we want to learn about. And then we've also came up with this side navigation, this custom draw component here. And to look into the details of that, we, just as a quick overview, we got the menu that we've created. We've got the menu data structure, and we also got the slug from the URL and the metadata from the MDX file. And then with those props, we're able to render various components. So we rendered out the introduction as its own sort of route, because whenever you click on one of these links, you go to the introduction section, and I'm going to have it set up such that each section has an introduction section. So that got rendered. And then we had links to those. And then we have the actual draw component, which contains that. And it also dynamically renders the, the menu, which takes care of the state of, whether things are open or not. And it also detects which particular route, or if a particular route matches one of these menu items, and if so, it will display the particular topic and subtopic, and it will highlight that so it's clear to the user which particular tab we're on. So it's clear that we're on the TypeScript tab, and we're in the basic section, and then we're in the types. And then also I should show and demonstrate the extra section. Okay, so we're getting a 404 here, and it's kind of good that I showed that, because we can see that we're going to /extra here, which indicates that it's going to the uppercase. So if I just quickly come to this label here, and I just say to lowercase, and the slug should already be lowercase. But now if I go here, and let's just go back. If I click on extra now we're going to the lowercase version, so that works. So it's good that I went there to test things out. And then of course, you have your sections, and then you're mapping through those, and then each section has a subsection, and then you can list that out. So thanks so much for watching this video. In the next video, we'll continue to work on our coding blog. So please subscribe to my YouTube channel, and I'll see you in the next video. Cheers.